Hey everybody, I want to welcome you to this week's Galilee podcast. Really excited. Today we're going to do something that I'm really looking forward to doing more of as the weeks go on, the months go on, years go on of doing this, is we're going to take some time periodically when we feel like it would be beneficial to sort of explore maybe a little bit more of sermons and topics and things that maybe we've been talking about on Sunday morning. And so today we're actually going to do a little follow-up, if you will, from Sunday's message. So I'm here with Brian and Blake. They're going to join me today. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the Great Commission. And kind of, for those of you who maybe have missed it, we're going to talk a little bit about that. And then we're going to dive into, I think, some hindrances we think that sometimes we can run into when we try to make disciples. So that's kind of what's on the docket for today. But before we get into that stuff, a couple of things we want to definitely remind you of as a church. It's really important. Number one is that tomorrow night, this is recorded on, it'll be Thursday when we release this, so tomorrow night, Friday evening, we've got our family fun night. That's July 10th. We've got Chick-fil-A coming out. We're going to have family trivia. Then the movie at 8:45. Really want to encourage you to go to our website. Also go to our Facebook page to see all the information about that. And also making sure that you notice some of the things that we're going to be doing to help create a safe environment. In case you have questions about that, there are some things that we're going to be doing to try to help create a safe environment for families and friends that come out. So make sure you check our website and the Facebook page for some of that stuff so you can stay up to date on all of that. The other thing too is last week we had a big announcement that starting as of right now, August 2nd, we are going to be moving into phase 2 of our reopening plan. So if you didn't see that email, again, I want to encourage you to go to Galilee.org. We've got our entire plan put there, and you can see all the details about it. Really the big difference between phase 1 and phase 2 is we're going to be reopening some children and nursery programming as well as Sunday school. Is that true for youth?
Yes, we'll be doing some Youth Sunday AM. Yes.
So Youth Sunday AM stuff as well. As I mentioned last week in the podcast, I'm hoping that probably not next week, but probably the week after, I'm going to try and get our entire ministry staff together and talk about phase 2 a little bit so that we can maybe help answer some questions for people about what specifically it will look like, especially as we talk about the different areas. If you've got a student in the youth ministry and you're curious as to what that's going to look like for them, we'll have Brian explain that. Same thing with children, nursery, and worship and some other things too as well. So that's a big change for us. It's a big move. Really, once we get past phase 2, phase 3, and 4, pretty simple at that point. So we want to make sure that everybody knows about that. That's August 2nd. So we're going to talk a little bit about more of that probably in the next couple of weeks as well. Lastly, before we get into the things for today, is last couple of weeks we've been talking about texting to give, and this is really a big deal. We're very excited. We are in the process of working on an app that's for the church. It's going to be the Galilee Christian Church app. Coming in the next few weeks, as part of that, we're going to be able to start giving through that platform. As a lead up to that, and even while we have that platform, you can also begin to text and give. Some of you have been going to online, and a lot of you have shifted to online giving, and we're very appreciative of that. That really helps out. And so if you want to do that, keep doing that. But one of the easy ways you can do it now is you can just text. You can actually text the word Galilee CC, all one thing, to the number 7797.
Should I do that now?
Yeah. Do you want to do that real quick? Yeah. Go ahead and give right this second. And you'll notice that it's great. If you've already been doing it, one of the things I love about it is I've been doing it for the last couple of weeks, and it remembers me. It remembers what I gave. It remembers how where I want it to go. So it's really much easier. Once I got through that first week, now I just text it, sends me a link. I click on the link, and then I just hit, give. You can also set it up for recurring. If you're one of those that would like to maybe think about, it's easier if I just set this up to be a bit more automatic, then you can do that as well. It's as simple as clicking a button, and it's really easy. And what's really great about it too is we're switching to PushPay, which is a nationally known large corporation that does a lot of churches, specializes in churches like this. And so you can know that their their software and their stuff is sound. So if you're one of those that's nervous about online giving because of you just feel nervous about security and whether your stuff's going to get taken care of, trust me, PushPay is. When we asked them this question, they said, look, we use the same things that your bank uses. So all of the big banks, the same kind of security codes and practices that they use, PushPay uses. So you know that it's up to par. So I want to encourage you, if you're maybe on the fence about online giving, man, this is a great opportunity to start trying it, and PushPay is an easy way to do that. All right, so let's get into the discussion today. We're going to talk a little bit about the message from this past week. Brian did a great job finishing off this series that we've been in called A Life's Work that Nick has been walking us through, looking at the life of Jesus. And of course, you can't end the life of Jesus without looking at his last words on earth. And so that's the Great Commission. And we're going to do a little discussion on that. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. So maybe I'm going to have Brian here in a second give us kind of a recap. If you did miss it, I would encourage you to go and listen to it. And then we're just going to kind of talk a little bit about, I think, some hindrances. What are some things that keep us from maybe obeying that? Because, I imagine that if you've been at our church for any length of time, you've heard this command taught on a lot. We talk a lot about it a lot. Nick preaches on it a lot. But sometimes we'll run into blocks, right? Things that are maybe keeping us from obeying it or living it out. And so we're going to talk a little bit about those. These are not exhaustive. We're not going to cover every single one, but these are some that I thought of, and then as we walk through the Great Commission, these guys are going to get to speak into it. And we're also excited to have Blake here. He's going to speak into or maybe share a little bit of his thoughts. And then you're going to see some guys just basically discuss for a little bit. So that's kind of the plan. But Sunday, Brian talked to us out of Matthew 28. And really, what I loved was you started in 16. And I think that's really great because we always start in 18, but you started in 16. And there's some things I really like about 16 and 17 that add to the Great Commission. But why don't you give us kind of a summation of kind of what you shared with us on Sunday?
Sure. I got the Great Commission. So sometimes I think like the ones that we hear so much are really hard to teach because okay.
What else can you say about it?
Yeah, I know that. Like, you don't have to tell me again, like, we know the Great Commission. Hello, like, how are you going to, what angle are you going to go? So I think those are challenging sometimes, but also it's one we can't go to sleep on. Like, these are our marching orders. Yeah. It's what we have to do and be about. So really, I just started with, the authority of Jesus and how important that is and how his authority over heaven and earth should compel us to get busy. And Sunday in the live version, quote unquote, I use these kind of boxes to talk about each one. I didn't get to do that in the one we filmed earlier. Just it wouldn't have worked for that. And actually, I didn't have that idea
until afterwards.
Yeah, I was in the shower a couple days before Sunday, and thought, well, this would be maybe an easy way to talk about it. So really, I just kind of break it down, and it's something I read in a commentary about the actual Great Commission of going, making disciples, baptizing, and teaching. You can't see those 4 boxes here. And actually, in that verse, it looks like to you and I, there'd be 4 verbs. Yeah. Like we should go, and we should. We should make disciples, we should baptize, and we should teach. But actually, what I learned through reading that and doing some research on the Great Commission is actually in the original Greek, there's just 1 verb, and the others are adjectives to build off that one.
Right. Oh, yeah.
So the main one that Jesus says, like, I want you to be about is making disciples, and then the others going and baptizing and teaching kind of are how are points to how we get here. It's like all built on this. Yeah. And I just really tried to drive that idea home that how we make disciples are going, baptizing, and teaching. Yeah. And then a couple things I'm learning about how we do that.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was great. When we were sitting in the back, I said, I leaned over to April. I said, so it's Jesus says make disciples by basically going, baptizing, and teaching. And I like that because it's the reminder that the actual action that we're doing is making disciples, and then these other things are how that is done. And I think it's really so important because one of the things I feel like the modern churches run into so much is we kind of stop halfway. And a lot of churches, we're like, okay, we can get them baptized, and then we're kind of done, right? We've done our job. Yeah. But Jesus it's it's teaching as well, teaching them to obey. And so discipleship is not just about conversion, it's not just about people getting dunked, it's also about that growth afterwards. And it's important for us to remember that Jesus doesn't have in mind just one piece, but the entire thing. Right? Yeah. So one of the things that I love that you started with verse 16,
Sure.
And especially 17, because it's really funny. This happens to me. This may happen to you guys when you read a verse that you know 1,000 times, and then you read it again, and you're like, oh my gosh, I've never noticed that. And for me, it was 17 when he says, and when they saw him, they worshipped him, but some doubted. And I thought that was just that hit me for a second. I was like, man, these are not guys, even at the end of life, who were like so certain that I know what I'm doing right now. But people who are still wrestling with, I'm not sure that And I thought that was a great reminder, because again, we can sometimes look at the disciples and the first Christians and elevate them to this level of they're better, they're so much better than I could ever be. But yet we see even at the end, right, even before this, they're still wrestling with, I'm not sure if I can do this. I'm not sure if is this even real? Is this what I'm supposed to be doing?
Think how much they've had to process, like all they've seen Jesus do, and then process all that of what he said, and then, they're figuring out. They're not. We call them the disciples, but they're probably not fully.
Right.
Discipleship has not run its course with all of them. They're still learning, and they're still going to be taught, and like they're still, figuring it out. And it's cool that Matthew leaves that little doubted in there. I think it's a good thing, and like it's okay to doubt. Like it's okay, but still point toward Jesus, right? Right.
And that's why I was thinking about the idea of hindrances, because again, I have doubts. I have doubts about I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I'm capable. I don't know, am I going to say the right thing? Am I going to do the right thing? Especially now in a culture that we live in, and you can speak to this a little bit, I think, that changes so quickly. Mm-hmm. And especially if you're someone maybe who's older and you're looking at your grandkids and you're going, I don't even recognize what they're going through.
Sure.
And I think about this a lot. Like I thought about this one time with my grandmother who was sitting there with an iPad. I was like, how crazy must it be for her? When she was a little girl, like the radio was like the next best thing.
Sure.
And here she is, she's got this little iPad in her hand, And all the change that took place in her life. And then you think, I've heard somewhere that information doubles every year, every so many months. It's ridiculous how much stuff is going on out there, and how inundated people get with info and life and stuff, that for a lot of people, culture is changing so quickly, it's so different, it's so weird, that it's like, sometimes, you get that sense of I don't even know where to begin, right? You got any thoughts on that?
I can definitely agree with you on that. I actually, I was just on YouTube a couple weeks ago and just watching some sermons, and there was this one dude who talked about that and talked about how our generation is so overexposed to everything, and we're getting everything in so fast and in such, big quantity that we're really overwhelmed, And a lot of people doubt the world and doubt how bad it's becoming right now. But one way he put it was, is our world really as bad, really this much worse than it's been in the past, or is it just that we're getting everything so quick that it just seems so bad? And I think that can bring in a lot of doubt. Just seeing that by itself, just seeing all the sin in the world, can make someone think, this isn't as easy as I thought it was going to be. This might be really hard, actually, And I think I think the technology and how much culture itself has changed definitely has brought in more doubt into people's lives.
And life now, to me, feels so much more instant than it used to be. You can instantly, people are tweeting about this instantaneously, it feels like. And that just comes at you so fast and so quick. And it's like within a matter of seconds, you can have 1,000 tweets that you're trying to get through to see this thing, or posts or whatever. And then I've also, social media has given voice to everyone. And that's not necessarily bad. I'm not sure that that's necessarily an evil thing, right?
Sure.
I always believe that good conversation and good discussion is okay. Jesus wins in the end no matter what, whoever comes to the table. But again, you've got also all these different voices coming at you from different angles and platforms. And you really have to be on guard, yourself, and then also not to get overwhelmed and have those doubts just hit you so fast because you're like, man, I don't know even where to begin. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to live in a world that's changing as fast and as quick as it is. And I commend you two for working with students because what generation are we on now? Z or Y or are they going backwards now?
We're back to A now.
Yeah, back to A, yeah. Well, and that's just crazy. That's like a whole nother conversation for another day. It's just like, because I feel like it's really, I've had this realization one day. I feel like I was just thinking about how to reach millennials, and it's like, nope, we're past them now. It's like you get past them before you even recognize that they're there, and everyone's griping about, oh, those millennials. We're past them now. We got this whole other generation underneath them. Like, my daughter is not even in that group anymore. She's part of something else. So
it's crazy.
Yeah, I'd love to do some conversation on that. All right, so let's kind of walk through some of these things you got here. So making disciples is the actual verb.
Yeah, that's the one we build on. Like that's what these are all built on. And then we get to this one, and I kind of share this is my toughest one is going. Like I think that's really hard for me. I kind of shared that. Like, let's talk real. Like, that's what I struggle with. Like, shared everybody at the house is a Christian. Most of my friends are Christian. Everybody I work with, unfortunately, you're Christian. I wish I could convert you. But
hold on, I can
like everybody is in my world. Like, I have to get out of my little bubble, my Christian bubble. And I struggle. Where do I find that and have family? And that's, as we talk about, why is this hard? Like, that'd be one of them,
Yeah.
What's your excuse, right?
Right. Well, I mean, and it is a hard thing. I mean, you and I are dads, so we've got, we've got life, we've got kids, we've got their things, we've got church stuff, and it's hard. I think it's particularly hard for us because of the fact that our life centers around church so much, right? Because we're here all the time, and we're always preparing for the next time that people are coming to us.
Sure.
So our natural position becomes to kind of, they're going to come to us. And it gets hard sometimes for us to find those natural outlets where we're around other people that are not believers. For our family, that's part of the reason why we've shifted and are trying to play more rec ball. You know what I'm saying? We're shifting to that rec ball thing. I know for some people that's not, they do that all the time. Right. But we were playing a lot of Upward, and I love Upward. Upward's a great place to get started. And I mean, you and I both participate in Upward, and you too as well. So Upward's a great place, but I think, for us, we just kind of decided, Upward is great, and people come to it, and yes, there are people who are not Christians who come participate in Upward, absolutely. But just, we're gonna start going to Rec League, and that'll at least get us around other people whose other kids either go to the same school as ours or whatever. So that was an intentional thing, and that's kind of the hard thing. We have to kind of be intentional. Sure. And and believe it or not, I thank you for the shout out you gave. It's hard for me to go too. I mean, especially I really want to do a better job of loving my neighbors who actually live near me. But that's the hardest thing for me because honestly, when I get home, I just pull my car in the garage, I lower the garage, I go inside the house, and it's easier than standing out there waiting for someone to get home and be like, I'm going to talk to Tom today, or whatever.
Can you talk into that a little bit? Because I know you and I reference Andy. Like, I think you guys are good at going. Like, what is in your mindset? Are you just like totally leaning on God? I'm scared as anything inside. Like, I don't know what's going to happen. Like, what's going through your mind? How did you get that mindset to continue to go?
Right. So, I mean, first off, I am afraid every time. Okay. I'm just nervous. I'm scared. I don't, because to be honest, my first thought is these people are going to think I'm weird. Secondly, I have actually been kicked out of a neighborhood by police.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
In Pendergrass, we went into a neighborhood and someone called the cops on us.
I could have used that story in my sermon.
You could have. I first should have told you. Yeah, we got called the police. Wow. They pulled up and we were talking to a lady, and she talked to, they came and they talked. It's like, some people talked to us about a guy and a Hispanic man and his looked like a boy walking through the neighborhood, and we're like, I was like, yeah, that's clearly us. And they were like, and of course the homeowner we're talking with is like, they're fine. Like, they offered to pray with us. Like, that's no big deal. Like, what's the deal? And I just said to the officer, hey man, we're just out praying with people. That's all we're doing, And that's really our process, right? Okay. We're out here whenever we do a walk or whatever, it's always from the perspective of, hey, we're just here to pray with people. You know, like I can pray. Like I can just pray for you. I mean, we're out walking the neighborhood, praying for the neighborhood, praying for our community.
Sure.
And if as we come across people, can we pray for you, right? And so, you know, they're like, and then it was one of those funny things where the police officer then looked at the other one and go, hey man, they're just trying to get people to go to their church, dude. So, and they're like, oh, okay, well, you need to move on. So we're like, oh, okay, so we moved on, you know, and that's actually the first and only time that's ever happened. But one of the things, again, is offering to pray for people. Like that's just a great opening thing, right? And most people are not like, no, I don't want you to, right? And that's the great way to start, you know, always be like, hey, I'm just here, we're just loving people, and we want to love you today. We're praying for this neighborhood. Can we pray for you? You know, one of the things that I noticed Andy does a lot, and I've tried to do better of, and I'm not good at it, but praying for a waiter or waitress. Hey, because I'm already gonna pray for the meal, right? I mean, you know, hey, we're about to bless this food. You know, we're gonna ask God to thank God for this food. Can we pray for you? Is there something that we can pray about when we do this, right? And then oftentimes they're like, yeah. One funny story is one guy actually thought we wanted him to pray for our food, so he started doing like, no, we're gonna pray for you. But you know, that's another one, because the other thing too, especially right now, is you got a lot of waiters and waitresses that are going through a lot, right? And if you've never waited tables, like when you're not a high school kid or a college kid, waiting tables is not the best job in the world. No, I mean, you know what I'm saying? And yet there are a lot of older people, that's what they do. That's their income. And when, especially now, when you've got a lot of those restaurants and stuff that have been closed down forever, and that are just now coming back online, and quite frankly are the easiest to get closed again, and those are the easiest to let go. I mean, when you're waiting tables, if you've never waited tables, you get about $2 an hour. Right, I mean it's like $2-3 an hour is the rate. So literally everything comes on tips, and you've got these women and especially moms. You see this a lot of single moms, a lot of moms. This is the income.
Yeah.
They're making that money, and they need those tips. They need that money to pay for school or to pay for daycare or to health. So a lot of them are going through a lot. That's why I say that. So those are simple little strategy things that you could use right now, is to say, hey, can we just pray for you right now? I know, especially right now, I know restaurant life has been hard. Can we pray for you? Is there something that our family can think about you about while we pray? And that opens a natural bridge in conversation. And those little things, to me, are confidence boosters. Like that. I mean, again, you're not asking necessarily for them to stand there and you lay a hand on them. You're just saying, when my family prays for this meal, we want to pray for you. Can we do that? And those little things are easy ways to build that confidence of going out. And then you feel more comfortable as you engage in other conversations with people. Because if you can do it then with a waitress, you could probably do it with a neighbor.
True.
Do it with a neighbor, you could probably start doing it at when you see somebody at the store or whatever. So, you know, little things like that build confidence. But I'm always nervous. I'm always scared. And I think that's healthy, because that nervousness then makes me go, okay, God, I need you to help me to show. Because again, that's the end of verse 20. I mean, I think that too, when you take verse 17 and verse 20 together, you get, they doubted. This is why he says at verse 20, right, I'm with you. Right. He's trying to comfort that doubt in verse 17 and go, don't freak out. Right. I'm with you. Right. And so that's one of those things too. You have to keep in the back of your mind, or in your heart as you go forward.
I mean, this could be like a 4-week sermon series.
Oh,
right?
for sure.
Just talk about going 1 week.
Yeah.
Talk about. Probably start with that one. Then you just build and talk about baptism 1 week and teaching. I mean, you could.
Yeah.
It's hard to pack that in. I wish I would have had more than 25 minutes. Yeah. You kind of had to highlight these, but I'd love to know what we're doing right now and kind of get them a little deeper. But can't always do it.
Here's the thing I would think, especially from the two of you, because again, we've got a lot of grandparents in our church. We've got a lot of parents in our church. Because you made a great point. Like the Andy Stanley point was amazing. Like the first disciples we raised are the ones that are, the greatest thing are the people in our home. Sure. And the reality is the going may be to family members, right? It may be to have a conversation with a teenager, or with a child, or with a grandchild who's maybe a teenager. Can you talk a little bit about, like, from that perspective, like, what are some ways you guys feel like, as a grandparent, again, they're looking at their grandkid going, man, we are generations apart, and I almost at times don't understand them. Good ways to be able to connect with them, to go to them, as a young guy,
I think the biggest thing that I guess the older generation can do for the younger generation is almost just try to connect with them, and it doesn't have to be a mom, dad, or granddad doing everything the teen wants to do, but maybe also taking the teen out and showing them stuff that maybe they did growing up. But just finding ways to connect. I feel like a lot of the younger generation right now, especially the ones coming up, they like to do a lot together, and they like connecting with each other, and I think we've seen that through going to camps, through Wednesday nights. You always they just find their groups that they connect with, and they like that. So, and I think it also makes it easier for them to be vulnerable with each other when they connect. So just getting on the same level and just really understanding like what life looks like for them now, what they do now, could help build that relationship into, I guess, growing together and being able to talk Jesus and the Bible and discipleship together.
I just really think that grandparents, your voice is a lot louder than you think. Like young people realize that you've got experience and you've walked in these shoes, and any way you can point towards Jesus, whether that's a text the first day of school, hey, I just want you to know that I'm praying for you, throughout the week. That quick text or a call, or when you do see them, say, hey, I just want you to know I'm praying for you. I mean, I can't tell you how many times my grandmother, it was a different time because we just talked about technology, but she would write me a card and just say, I'm praying for you. And here's the thing, I knew she was, that meant a lot. Anytime we can use the influence God's given us to point toward God, I think is an important thing to do. I just think continuing to help mom and dad, continue to reinforce that. Hey, why don't you come with us to church this week? Why don't you check out the youth group here and just give them a try if they don't have a place to connect spiritually.
I think you touched on something right there too, and especially for grandparents. I'm not a grandparent, so I can't imagine, but I do imagine there is that sense of, especially when you talk about grandkids, you feel a little out of the loop because they're not my kids.
Right.
But it is, I think there is I know as a parent, one of the things that I love is when my parents or my in-laws reinforce
what you're saying.
What we're saying, right? That power of going like, see, we're not the only ones saying this. And you touched on something too that I think is important. I think it's important about discipleship in general. And I recently was listening to a podcast on parenting, and the guy said something really powerful that it resonated with me, which is be curious about your kids, right? Have curiosity about your kids.
Sure.
And I realized that I'm not always that way. Okay, so I find myself at times with my daughter, because of my particular personality type, I'm always like, there's the right way to do it, there's my way. And I always find myself like, no, this is the way to do it.
Right.
And he was talking about that, and he said, one of the things that you can do is you can try to be more curious. Why do you want to do it that way? Why does that matter to you? And I think that, first off, that's kind of a little bit of what you're talking about a little bit as from a parent or grandparent standpoint of being curious about a younger generation. Because again, when I'm curious, I'm not coming with a judgmental spirit. I'm not coming with a heart of like, you're wrong. You're coming with a humble spirit of, like, why is that so important to you? Or why does that resonate with you? Or why do you like that? Or just coming from that perspective of curiosity and of understanding and putting yourself in that position of humility is powerful. And that's, I think, as you move into maybe the next one, when we talk about baptizing or even going, that's a healthy posture, our boxes here, a healthy posture to take. Right? Because especially when it comes to gospel sharing, we have the truth and we have what's right? And we want to tell them what's right. But, oftentimes people don't, right now especially, people really, that old adage, they don't want to hear what you say and tell them how much you care. And taking that position of curiosity about them, about their life, about their perspective of the world is powerful, because it's communicating to another human being, you matter. right? You matter to me. I'm not just here to beat you on the head and tell you how wrong you are, but I'm curious about your life and where you are, you know? And I think for a lot of those of us out there, especially if you find yourself in a work environment, you know, like you're saying, we're all Christians here, so, you know, but, you know, you think about that person that maybe works next to somebody at work, you know, who's different than them, has different opinions on them, who, you know, expresses different political views or whatever, you know, you're going to run into that kind of stuff. It's easy for us to turn ourselves off to them because we know automatically they disagree. But what if we took a posture of humility and curiosity and step over to that person's cubicle and just, how's life, man?
Sure.
Tell me about your family. Tell me about your kids. Tell me about your spouse. Tell me about, you know, taking that position of humility underneath them.
Ask questions.
Ask questions, right. And then that allows us to bridge the gap, to go, oh, okay, well, you know what, here's what I think about that, and open those conversations.
Very true.
You know. So one of the things I wanted to talk about when it came to gospel sharing, and this is a facet of gospel sharing that I think seems redundant, but again, it's one of those things we have to remember, which is, in order to be a good disciple maker, in order to I think be a good gospel sharer, you got to know Jesus yourself, right?
Yeah.
And it's, right. Well, I mean, it starts. I mean, self-discipleship. Like and I know it seems ridiculous to say, but that's where it all begins.
Right.
Making disciples begins there, because I have to be growing and I have to be maturing. So I'm reading this book right now, and if you watched my podcast last week, I mentioned a little bit of this book, but I'm reading this book right now, and it's about discipleship. And in it, the author tells this story about his 3-year-old who loves volcanoes, right? He says, my 3-year-old loves volcanoes. And when he was 3, he's older now, but he said when he was 3, he was just infatuated with that, and we had to read every book on volcanoes. We had to watch every documentary on volcanoes.
Sure.
He said, to be perfectly honest, I could care less about volcanoes. My wife, our older son, none of us had any interest in it whatsoever. But our 3-year-old was in love with volcanoes. So he says, I know more stuff about volcanoes than I should, right? So he said that at some point they decided they were going to take a family vacation, and they were going to go to Mount St. Helens, and they wanted to see, because their son wanted to see the volcano, right? So they went, and they went they went to there, and they were walking. I think he said they took a tour, and he says that they were taking the tour, and the person was talking about the volcano. You know, he realized when they did that, and he realized he was actually enjoying himself. Like, this is fascinating. And he said when they got home, they were all talking about it, and to this day, he said that's one of their most favorite vacations ever, was to the volcano, right? And he talks about, he said, my son discipled our family on volcanoes, right? His love of volcanoes influenced us so much so that by the time we got to Mount St. Helens, we were volcano experts. And now, he said, our whole family loves to learn more about volcanoes, right? It's ridiculous, but he talks about that's the power of discipleship.
Sure.
And that starts with a genuine interest in love in the subject matter, right? And so, what are some things you feel like help you just love Jesus more and more every year and every day? Because I think that's where we got to start, right? And disciple making is that love for Him. Is it growing? Is it? Do I want to be more and more like Him?
Sure. You know, for me, I think it's a lot of times it's through Scripture. You know, reading a little bit about Jesus or something. You know, even this sermon series where Nick's just kind of stopping and we're just talking about Jesus in these different points and really expounding on that. I think that's always good. I'm a big listener I love listening to podcasts, and I also like listening to the other side of the coin sometimes.
Yeah.
Like I like to listen to some people who are atheists and just kind of hearing their arguments about the historical Jesus, you know, as they would call it, and then looking, well, does that match up, you know, and then looking also some people who would be quote unquote apologists who are, you know, can back up more Jesus than I ever could, you know, and seeing those two sides and saying, man, I really, as I look at Scripture, I see that it is true and it is real, and that kind of, you know, helps me. I would say serving people also something that makes me want to be more like Jesus. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know, I've always enjoyed that, and it helps me remind what we're supposed to be about,
Yeah.
what we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
That we're supposed to be, not just know about Jesus, but his hands and feet.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. How about you, Luke? What's some things?
I think some things that just really just grow my love for Jesus. Ultimately, this might sound like the classic youth minister thing, but it's
guys
like
have
it's like the kids that we get to work with,
Yeah.
you know. And I also do Young Life in Athens
Yeah.
over at Oconee High School, and it's just doing that. When I decided that I wanted to go into ministry, it was mainly because I had those people in my life, you
Yeah.
know. I had my Young Life leaders, I had Brian, and I just watched how all of them worked with not only myself but other people, you know, who needed help, who needed guidance. And I was like, you know, I want to do that I want to be that for somebody. And just being able to just show up and do that,
Yeah.
you know. And after putting in the time and the love into these kids and growing the relationships, I know that if my love were to stop going for Jesus, like theirs might too, you know.
Yeah.
So because they look to me for the answers for their questions,
Yep.
for the knowledge of the Bible. So that's kind of what keeps me going, is knowing I have people I have to pass this down to. I have
Yeah.
people that look up to me, you know. So that's just why I think that just drives me to keep learning more. But yeah.
Yeah, I think, you know, both of you are touching on the thing. I mean, obviously the first answer is, you know, the most churchy answer is the scriptures, right? I mean,
Sure.
I love reading the Bible. I've enjoyed reading the Bible through this
Yeah.
year. It's been just one of the most exciting parts of my time, and I've really enjoyed it. But the other thing is that idea of being around people. Like when you start to get around people and you start to spend time with people on just a personal level, like you start to me, that's one of the things, I don't know, like right lately, that's this sort of resounding message I keep getting, is like, get around people, and the more around people means I get to then love like Jesus loves,
Yeah, sure.
right? So I get to do that,
Sure.
just like he did that, you know. It's and so it's like that. Serving people and being around loving people. When you have them looking out to you,
Yeah.
that makes you, like, it helps you step up the game a little bit. First
Makes
off,
you feel needed.
yeah, you feel needed, you feel important, you feel like you're adding value, and then when you begin to add value into people's lives, you get to live like Jesus for a little bit. You're like, this is cool. Like, he is awesome, and you get to understand his own love for you. And that idea too is really important and that's kind of the importance of valuing people, right? And making sure that people feel valued and loved and cared for. And that is something I've always been admired about you, Brian. How are some ways that you try to pour into people and let them know, man, like, this is how I value you? Maybe just some simple things. I mean, you're a note guy, first off. I know.
I think the power of a note within a digital world is, anytime that you see handwriting, it's just more powerful these days. I don't know why that is.
Because I feel like it took more energy to write that note
Oh, yeah,
than to type it, than to text it.
Yeah,
You know?
it definitely does. It definitely does.
And I don't mind the misspellings. That's the thing. Because to me, I'm like, good.
Right.
This person's a real
I
human
can't even
being.
tell what this guy's writing. Dude, it's my handwriting is so bad. Now, I don't know why. It's just something that I've always picked up on, and I realized when I got a note how powerful that was. Like, I have a cigar box in my office. Not that I'm smoking cigars, okay?
Yeah. No.
But I have this old cigar box because they're cool looking, you know?
Yeah.
And I've just kept a bunch of these notes that over the years people have written me. And sometimes when it's a day it's crappy, you know, whatever,
Yeah.
like, I'll just go through and I'll remember the truths of, hey, you know, thanks for being, and it just helps remind me of, it puts that value back into me. You know, like, if you break down the word encouragement, is I love to speak courage into people. Because so often I need people to speak courage into me.
Yeah.
You know, and I just always, I don't know why, I've tried to always, and I think this, especially in students, I think if there's any time I needed an extra push or an extra, hey, I'm in your corner, it was when I was either middle or high school or college years.
Yeah.
You know, you don't know who you are. You're trying to be someone you're not.
Yeah.
I think trying to find a value you find in someone is just, it's a powerful thing, and it helps me build relationship with people just through a note. I don't know why. I've just always kind of been a note person, and I just I've seen fruit from it too. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's fruitful. It's just been very fruitful for me. Like, a guy at camp shared a story, and it was like hey, he hadn't been to youth group in a while, and now he's like a youth minister at our church. His name's Tyler. He's a youth minister, and I just sent him a note like just, hey, we haven't been here in the last couple of weeks. We miss you, love you.
Yeah.
And he brought up like that meant so much to him. I'm like, it's just, it was nothing, you know. I mean, but so when I hear a story like that, I'm like, if I could have an impact like that through a little note, through 35 cents or whatever the stamp is now. I think it's 52. It's not 35 anymore.
They're forever stamps, so I don't even worry about it.
Right.
Whatever it is.
Well, they've always been something I can put value into people.
Yeah.
And I just always kind of gravitated toward that. I don't know.
Yeah, there are people in this church who do it, and I appreciate it. One that comes to mind, I give a special shout out, is Miss Alicia Scoggins. Man, I love her because she knows everyone's birthday, and she reminds you it's so and so's birthday, and wherever you are, make sure you know it's so and so's birthday. So you want to make sure, and that's great. Someone who's keeping up with that, because that, again, those are those little touches. Just to walk up and say, hey man, happy birthday, by the way.
She called the house the other day on a Sunday. It was Max's birthday, my father-in-law, and it was like, do you know a lady named Lisa? Like, yeah, I know her. He's like, she called to wish me happy birthday, and it like meant something to him. Like, he felt valued. Like, someone would not just get on Facebook and say happy birthday, but then actually pick up the phone. And don't even know him called.
She called us just to say happy 4th of July. Right? I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, that's the kind of those little things. Touches, yeah. And especially for somebody maybe who is at home and feels like, what can I do for the church? Like, even feels like I don't know how to serve in the church.
Sure.
Listen, write notes. Right? I mean, just get a big note, box of cards.
Right.
And just send notes to people. I mean, Alicia's, honestly, she shows up to church, but one of her great ministries to our church is she just sends notes, or she makes a phone call.
It's powerful.
And those little things help people feel value.
Yeah.
And that's something that I have to learn and get better at. The note thing I need to do. I've got a box of them in my thing. I need to start sending them. One of the things I need to start doing, I'm committing in front of everyone, is to start praying. Okay, Lord, put a name on my heart this week, and I'm going to pray for you, and I'm going to write you a note. Someone sent me on this same note, that's what brought it up, sent me a link to a sermon from John Maxwell, who was talking about this very idea of valuing people. And he told a story that I thought was unbelievable. He said that they were at a Christmas party for his organization. It was not church, but his ministry's Christmas party. And he had a heart attack at the Christmas party.
Whoa.
So, they're whatever. They're going through all that, and he's, they get him in the ambulance to take him. Well, afterwards, he said that one of the people that works in the ministry came up to him and said, John, you're so amazing. He said, what do you know what I do? He said, you were literally in the middle of having a heart attack. You were walking over out of this banquet hall to get in the ambulance. And you made sure you stopped every person you passed and said, I just want you to know I love you.
Wow.
In the middle of a heart attack.
That's cool.
But that's the kind of just the heart of I want to make sure. Now, you could say, well, he's possibly end of his life there.
Sure.
But still, in the middle of what is very easily one of those, you can have a selfish moment, John. Sure. It's time.
Sure.
He still wanted to make sure that everyone he passed knew I valued you. You mattered to me. I love you. I don't want to leave this room until y'all know how much you mean to me. To live that kind of sense of because so oftentimes we take for granted that people are going to be there. Not to get too dark about it, but we do. I mean, we take for granted that people are going to be there. And one of the things I think this pandemic can hopefully remind us of is that life is crazy and weird things can happen, and those Sunday services that are quote unquote there every Sunday may not be.
Yeah.
And to value those moments and interactions that you have.
Sure.
Let's real quick. Let's move to our last one, teaching, and we're going to wrap up.
It's way down there.
Way down at the bottom. So Jesus tells us to baptize and to teach. And this is another big one that a lot of us in the church struggle with, because again, it's like, where do I start? What do I do? And hopefully we can talk about some practical things. I mean, obviously, I'd love to help you learn practically how to do that.
Sure.
So we have some studies already made up that are great for new Christians. I'm working on a study that I think I'm going to call First Steps. That all new Christians, anyone who can kind of walk through to kind of, again, those first steps of faith, walk them through some basic things that Jesus teaches. Because in Matthew 28, he says, teaching them to obey everything I've commanded you. So there are some basic commands that Jesus gives us that we can borrow, that we need to start practicing: prayer, giving, serving, stuff like that. So
I know the command of Christ thing you shared with me.
So
kind of those basic tenets to walk through.
Right, and study Scripture, and so we have those, and so I'll be glad to teach you. And we do it in a very simple Bible study format that's discovery based. It doesn't require you really to do a whole lot of study ahead of time. So you can sit down with anyone, read a section of Scripture, and just ask some very simple questions. So we can do that. But one of the things one of the lessons that I've learned that I want to pass on when it comes to teaching people is to be careful not to push too hard. Okay, be careful not to push too hard. Depending on, of course, your relationship with that person, who they are, what their makeup is, you can push someone or you can challenge someone to grow, and that's what we should do. But I have found at times, sometimes I think I'm challenging and I'm actually shoving. Okay? I think I'm challenging, but I'm actually shoving them. And this is something I don't know the right answer to. Like, I don't know what that right balance is, and you've got to kind of fill it out. But the reality is, we want to challenge people to step up to follow Jesus, but also realize that you can't shove them to follow Jesus.
Sure.
You can't whip them into following Jesus. You can just sort of lead them. And this is one of those things where, kind of going back to something we talked about a minute ago about making sure that we love Jesus. If that love and desire we have for Jesus kind of becomes infectious, and that's the first place we start, and people pick up that, your genuineness to want to love and follow Jesus, people will kind of want, I want to go where you're going because it seems to be much better than where I am. But at the same time, there are things that we need to challenge. Like, again, if I'm leading someone through that Bible study, those commands of Christ, I want to challenge them and say, hey, this week, I think you should start reading the Bible, right? Or you should start praying, right? So you're going to want to challenge them, and then you're going to want to hold them accountable. Accountability is another important piece of discipleship that people don't like, but we need to have. Like, how did that go with you this past week? But also being careful not to shove, right? Because people are going to take their own time. And so, when it comes to that accountability piece, I may say to someone, how did it go praying this week? And they may say, well, I didn't really get to praying every day. I prayed a couple of days, but I didn't pray every day. Again, the shoving part of that would be like, well, why didn't you get every day? Right. But again, to celebrate, well, hey, you prayed 2 times this week. That's more than you did the week before, right?
Celebrate that.
We're moving in the right direction. Little steps are still steps forward.
Just staying positive with them about it too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I know in my life that's always worked better than someone like a drill sergeant.
Yeah,
sure.
Right? Someone who's been encouraging,
turn them off.
Right. And so, I think about Jesus in the Scriptures. Jesus uses the analogy of shepherding, and he uses sheep and shepherds for a reason. There are no cattle in the Bible necessarily, and Jesus invites us as disciple makers and as leaders to be shepherds, not cowboys. And I think sometimes we can be careful. I mean, you've got cattle, that you can understand. Sometimes you got to get behind them, and you got to like yell, and you got to shove them sometimes to get them where you want them to go.
Yeah.
And those early cowboys would actually literally use whips, just whip the air and scare them forward. But sheep work differently. In the shepherding world of the Middle East, I mean, shepherds just basically walk, and they call, and their sheep just sort of follow, right?
A little more loving, right?
Right, it's a bit more loving. They don't necessarily, and that stick, mind you, that shepherd uses is more about protecting the flock than hitting the flock.
Right.
So again, as disciple makers, as we learn to baptize and teach people, we want to it's a bit harder because, again, I'm one of those, I want to shove you, I want to get you going, because, again, we're an instant, no matter how old we are, I think we're still instantaneous people.
Right.
We want you to get baptized, and then you're full on.
And making disciples is not an overnight thing.
It's
This
not,
is a
no.
long
Long
game,
process. And you guys can say that too as ministry students, as working with students. I mean, you get a kid at 6th grade, you're going to have them from 6th grade to 12th grade.
Sure.
That's a long time.
Yeah.
But you guys can speak to the growth that can happen in that time. And how many times, how many times at 7th grade you're like, this kid, I'm going to choke him. If he doesn't stop, I don't know if I can take it. But then when he's 18, you're like, this is a totally different kid.
Might have been me.
That was Blake, wasn't it?
No, Blake's he's always been easy to work with. But there has been several times, I'll bring up no names, but there's times where I'm like, how in the world? And then to watch them go through things and flourish, and go through tough times with family and flourish, sometimes not flourish, like have some tough seasons, a couple of years that are tough, but then to see them sometimes, not everybody comes out to the end where I get to see this beautiful story, like, where Blake's going into ministry. I don't get to see that all the time. I wish I did.
Yeah.
But, man, it is so cool to watch disciples get slowly made. Many times I would give parents the credit for most of that. I get them a couple hours a week.
Oh, yeah, sure.
But it's cool to watch discipleship slowly flourish and grow, and it's fun. And even now, like, with this, we've talked about digital a bunch. Like, over the 20 years I've been a youth minister, like, a ton of my past students are on Facebook, so I get to see them shepherding their families now, and what, and it's cool as an old guy to get set and peek in a little bit, and watch us, so it's cool.
Yeah. Blake, why don't you tell us a little bit, not only as someone who's now discipling people yourself, but as a person who was discipled. I mean, you grew up in our ministry here. Yeah. You grew, let's be honest, Brian's being nice. You probably were. I know, you're a great kid, I'm sure. But what's that like to have that, and you've talked a little bit about this already, but having that constant influence of someone who's loving and gracious and helping you grow, whether it's parents and grandparents and youth leaders, the value of that for you.
Ultimately, I think at that age, it just gives you that feel of being needed, like we were talking about earlier. I think one of the most important things to do, and especially that was done to me, was just people investing. Brian investing all the time he would put into it. And not even Brian, even the older kids. There was Olivia Yates, RJ helped out, Tyler helped out, just all of them guys just investing into the youth as well, and giving us maybe 8th and 9th graders, a 12th grader to look at and be like, wow, they're doing this, they like that, maybe that's something that I should be doing. And I think that investment into lives is something that really, really helps, because it also, you grow, it's not just a sheep and shepherd no more, like your friends, your brothers in Christ, you have this relationship, and it lets you know that if times get tough, like, there's going to be people there, and I think that's a big thing, especially because, like, if we're going out and if I'm going to tell Bob about God, and then Bob's like, okay, I'm gonna give God a try, and I never talked to Bob again.
Right.
I was the person who told him about it, and then he's gonna hit an obstacle and be like, well, I don't know what to do. So that investment and just keep showing up, and even especially in the hard times, and showing them that you're gonna be there too, is a huge, huge thing. Yeah,
and you touch on something really important that is probably, I think, sometimes a huge hindrance for people, and that is that discipleship is an investment. It's a long-term investment. And, in our modern culture, I think we've tried to help with that some, because it's like, okay, I brought my friend to church, they heard Jesus, they got baptized, now they can go get involved in one of their small groups, and and yet, but at the same time, as a disciple maker, Bob may be going to the church's small group, but Bob still needs me to help him, encourage him when he's not in that small group. And I would just say that that's one of the areas that we have to be careful of, that we don't get too hands off. Yes, we've got great programming. Yes, we've got some great things that we can offer you. But that doesn't take the burden necessarily of disciple making off of my shoulders. I still want to encourage Bob. I still want to be there for his family. I still want to check in on him, because I'm the one that led him to Jesus. But discipleship is an investment. It's a long-term investment, and that can be scary and daunting, especially as you guys have touched on, when because it's inevitable when that person hits a dark time, right? It's a hard patch.
Yep.
Especially if you're dealing with somebody who's really wrestling in life, and maybe they go through alcohol, maybe they're going through divorce, maybe they're going through some other things. To walk alongside that person in those moments, that's where discipleship, to me, rubber meets the road.
Yeah.
And so that can be one of those hard things, but one, it's what Jesus called us to do, so we gotta kind of sign up for that part of it. But the end result, right, is what makes it all worth it. Right? Yeah. All right. So I think we're going to wrap it up there. I appreciate you guys joining me today. Hopefully we've talked about some different things. Hopefully in our conversation we've been able to maybe help you. Hopefully too you've seen, even though we may be the ministers here, we still are figuring things out. Like we're still learning ourselves, and we're not always going to get it right, and we're trying to find the best way forward, and hopefully we've been able to show you a little bit of that as well. Is there anything you guys want to say, maybe we didn't talk about, or you just unending thoughts, maybe something that you would like to close with? You don't have to, I'm just wondering.
No, just thanks for the invite. And,
Yeah,
thanks enjoyed it, and keep doing this. I know a lot of people are enjoying these and watching them, so
thanks, man. I appreciate it. I've really enjoyed doing them, and they're a lot of fun for me. So one of the things I like about them is I think they're a great discipleship tool, right? And what I'm trying to do is kind of put myself in the position of learner.
Sure.
And so as I'm learning, I just pass that conduit, and other people can learn as well. So
And it's cool. It came out of the chaos of
pandemic.
right.
Yeah.
This cool thing has been birthed because of what we're walking.
Yeah. Hey, so again, I want to thank you guys. Remember this Friday. Also remember the text to give, and August 2nd, we're going to be moving into phase 2. But from us to you, we love you. We love your family. Know that we value you. You mean a lot to us, everywhere. If you are watching this and you are not a follower of Jesus and you've stumbled across it, please know that we want you to tell you about Jesus. We want you to know about how much He loves you and He cares for you, and the life transformation He can bring. So if you're wrestling with something, if you're wrestling with depression, anxiety, worry, fear, if you're walking through a divorce, if you're walking through, if maybe you're a parent who's watching your kid make some bad choices and you are brokenhearted for them, please, you can email us. I'm going to put some email addresses at the bottom right now, and feel free to email us, because we want to talk to you. We want you to know that no matter where you are, if you're here in Jefferson, Winder, Gwinnett County, or if you are in California somehow and you've gotten a hold of this video, we want to help you learn how to not only follow Jesus better, but we want to tell you about Him as well. So do not be afraid to reach out to us. But again, we love you, we thank you, and most importantly, Jesus loves you as well. And so we'll see you again next week in episode 15. Bye.